What's up, folks? It's Rickzilla here, and today I'm going to do something really different. I'm going to be doing something that should have been done a long time ago, and that is reading a quickie article. Tonight's quickie article is Chris and Religion. The article is filled with truth and honesty and was once article of the now. I believe in God and Jesus too. But God must hate me to put me in the lifestyle I am forced to be cooped up and bored with. Eli Lama Sabachthani, Facebook, 2013. So I dare say, with all due respect to the Lord, Chris abandons the Christian God for hyper-dimension Neptunia goddesses. I'm probably gonna misread this shit, but here we go. Christian Weston Chandler's religious beliefs have been a complicated matter for most of his life. He would declare himself to be a Christian. Yet, his stated religious convictions would often diverge starkly from his actual peculiar beliefs about God, sinfulness, and the nature of good and evil, incorporating a grab bag of other beliefs from unrelated traditions and other sources. Moreover, Chris has long believed himself to be of unique spiritual importance, believing that he received multiple visions from God, and that he has magical powers. Already in his comics, his characters would regard Chris as their creator and father. Their almighty creator and father, creating yet another tier on his wedding cake of theological contradictions. Since 2017, under influence by the Idea Guys and others, Chris has come to believe that he is a god, a CPU Blueheart, orchestrating an apocalypse that will end in a heavenly new creation. Much of his mythology was lifted from the hyperdimension Neptunia anime. The result is an unholy amalgam of authentic religious traditions, troll forgeries, and narcissism mixed together with either forethought nor consistency. If you're wondering why I have two screenshots of two side-to-side comparisons of Chris Chan and ShannyforChrist, well, you'll understand soon enough that eventually Shanny is going to end up abandoning her Christian beliefs in favor of some Mod Podge of, well, new religious ideals that are similar to Chris. It's only a matter of time before she abandons her true and honest religion for her Hyper Neptune BS, if that's possible. Assume if she's gonna follow Chris Chan. I digress. With religion, as with all things, Chris only hears what he wants to hear, same as Shanny and Donald Trump. Chris long espoused traditional Christian teachings condemning homosexuality, G-Man, while ignoring that it also forbids premarital sex, pornography, and gluttony, Shanny. This dissonance is exemplified in his reaction to the news that Panda Halo had been raped and impregnated by Clyde Cash. He actively encouraged her to spend time with her rapist because a child should know and be raised by both of its parents, shortly after encouraging her to get an abortion. Chris's narrow view of the world requires that Sonichu and Rosechu in the comics, and his true and loyal fan base in the real world, share his religious beliefs. Kind of sounds like Shanny and Rev. He has demanded that watchers worship him. That's going to be Shanny soon. and believes it feasible that he could convince half of the world population to join his personality cult. Again, Shanny does the same thing. Delusions of godhood. Fear not, for behold, I bring tidings of great joy. Sonichu, issue 10. I prayed for forgiveness from the real Christian. Sonichu, will he forgive me? Ask me Sonichu. Issue 10. Beyond his self-infatuation visible from any of Chris's creative output. Excuse me. Chris had shown from an early period the nascent belief that he might have been specially chosen. Chris might have developed a god complex as early as 2000, as the halo floating over his head on the cover of Christian's favorite hits seems to indicate. In his emails to Reggie Fils-Aimé, ready, my body is ready, Fils-Aimé, he seems to call himself Jesus. You have my word as an avid gamer, lamb of God, and humble human being that I will work very hard to save. However, this could also be a malapropism for word of God. I can't pronounce that word. Malapropism, or more definite signs, first emerged in late 2009 and have accreted over the decades since into Chris's current apotheosis. Sorry. These words are hard to pronounce. But starting on page 42 of issue 10, Chris displays a somewhat disturbing twist to the plot, such as it is, of his comics. Ultra Sonichu frees Zelina Rosechu from her stony state using his chaotic powers, then appears to darkbind Sonichu with a similar message in tone, if not outright text, to prophecies of the coming of Jesus Christ, which is a reference with the arms outstretched as if he were suspended on a crucifix. Later on in the issue, Ultra Sonichu travels to the world of Asperchu, where the characters of that comic informed that they were forced into their roles by Alec, and they had been praying to Christian Weston Chandler for deliverance and forgiveness. Lo and behold, Chris did send the Messiah Sonichu to end their suffering. Sonichu uses the chaotic remedy to miraculously cure them of their Asperger's, despite Asperchu only having the condition, and gives them new names and better looks. Better than Alex? Obviously. It should be noted that, like Jesus Christ, Sonichu was born of a virgin with rage. Even before this, Chris had directly compared himself to God. In issue 7, after Christian is lost in the time void, Sonichu says this: in the meantime, he will receive the accumulative memories of the passing moments, so in a way, he is looking down on us, like our Lord and Savior are able to. But the vision may be blurred. Forgive me if I'm misreading that. Sometimes I might have dyslexia, but I digress. Possibly in response to criticism about acting as God, in later pages, Chris addressed the issue of the non-canon chaotic combo worshipping him in an incredibly ignorant manner. First, he declares that he is not God, but a servant of him and Jesus. Kind of like ShannyforChrist. Forgive if I'm mentioning Shanny in most of these paragraphs, because the reason why I'm doing this article is because they both share the same beliefs. Not exactly the same beliefs, but similar. Okay, let me read that again. First, he declares that he is not God, but a servant of him and Jesus, and immediately goes on to forgive Michael who is the copycat Sonichu, for bearing false witness against Chris, as if he was the authority to forgive the breaking of the Ten Commandments, like he's God or something. In addition, only 5 pages later, Angelica condemns those who prefer Alex's artwork over Chris's as blasphemous. Again, Chris doesn't like it when people do redesigns of his characters. In case you're wondering, that whole spat with S&T, Courtney, he got triggered over some of the redesigns. So, this sentence right here does prove a point that anyone who does better artwork than him is considered blasphemous or heretic or something like that. It's stupid. Further evidence of Chris's blossoming God complex comes through his answer to some of the frequent asked questions that were put to him via the mailbag, where he states that he considers Sonichu to have over 1 million fans. The only other character who can claim such a number is God Jesus, or Allah Muhammad, and Leonard Bernstein, in Chris's eyes. This mad mentality is compounded by the fact that Chris is like a god to Sonichu. This means that his opinions of himself is that of a god's god, or maybe a god's bear, i.e. the bear conductor. The god bear, aka Leonard Bernstein, the bear conductor, who bestowed his name upon young Christopher. That's what it's referencing. Chris moves in mysterious ways. As a goddess myself, I am unable to worship in churches. Chris, June 2019. Again, I would like to see Shanny for Christ Chan indoctrinate these warped religions about her being a goddess of hyperdimension Neptunia. I want to see that happening. Assume if they make a re-release of hyperdimension Neptunia for whatever game console she has. It was under the idea guy's manipulation that Chris' gathering hypothesis came to a head. In November 2017, Chris became obsessed with Hyperdimension Neptunia, a video game / anime series. He declared a belief in body sharing with a goddess character who represents the Sega Dreamcast in the series. By consulting with Magichan and leaving his Dreamcast console powered on for 24 hours in order to focus his own psychic power onto it and pull the goddess into his body. Since then, Chris has come to believe that he's actually a goddess to the Sonichu universe. Yeah. The guy right here, White Knight Blue Heart. What was this? Never mind. Was this after Chris? Never mind. Doctrines of Quickianity. Chris's convictions, not that kind, are a confused tangle, ever shifting as Weens twist his malleable perception of reality and his mental state continues to deteriorate. The below seeks to describe Chris's contemporary beliefs as accurately as possible, through information is subject to change in light of new revelations at any time. Chris has hesitated to describe his beliefs as a religion. On April 13th, 2018, Chris claimed in a Twitter post that he no longer follows a religion. Yet, he is neither atheist nor Satanist. And over a year later would describe what follows as a belief and faith system, not a religion. I beg to differ. Critical to Chris's newfound religion is that he believes that he is sharing his body with a clone of the CPU goddess Yuzume Tenoboshi. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing that name. I only watch JoJo. Naming the clone that resides within his body as Orange Spiral Seal, Chris believes that he has the powers of the four main goddesses, as well as his own powers. In a way, this is a bizarre continuation of his classic love quest. Not only does he believe that he can create a new CPU goddess from the ground up, but that with the CPU, he will bring Crystal into reality and create her as a CPU goddess, saying that is something that God Jesus, the God Bear, would never grant to him. Yeah, he keeps calling God, and he thinks that God and Jesus were the same person, so he keeps calling them God Jesus. It's kind of like Sonic and Pikachu, Sonichu. God Jesus and the Bear Conductor. Chris's religion has little in the way of ethics, but he has indicated that he believes in the Hindu concept of karma, administered by himself as an instrument of his vengeance against the jerk cops who tormented him in years past. Jerk cops are Chris's term for police officers and mall security. He hates the cops. And given with what's going on with the riots and George Floyd, I wouldn't be surprised if Chris made any comments regarding the riots. But then again, Chris is in his own world, so it wouldn't surprise me if he ignored what was going on. However, like I said, this is going to be Shanny's religion soon, is the Hyperdimension Neptunia. Pantheon. August 2016. In August 2016, Chris revealed that he thinks of God as a goddess. Chris has long considered women to be good and men to be evil. And since Chris does not want to think of himself as a god or God as evil, he simply swapped the genders in his mind, making Tomgirl Christine and Goddess Emmanuel. During a conversation with Joshua Wise, Chris revealed that he had forsaken Christianity altogether, believing instead in the CPU goddesses from the anime Hyperdimension Neptunia. Someone better get Shanny to start watching Hyperdimension Neptunia so that she can think she's a goddess too. She is very impressionable, much like Chris. Chris's view of God's nature is naive and even childish. That's another thing Chris has in common with Shanny. Most of Shanny's views of God's nature is basically childish. And again, this paragraph here is, again, why I'm comparing ShannyforChrist to Chris Chan. Is because of this paragraph right here. Minus the pony sona. Well, this first sentence. But I'm dragging this on for long. He has used the fandom jargon acronym OCs as a rough quickism synonym for God, and uses this broad category to include Christ, men respected but not worshipped in their own separate traditions like the Buddha, ancient pagan gods such as Zeus, the Neptunia CPU goddesses, and other anime characters, himself and his viewers, and lazy pony sonas. He is extremely syncretic, believing all of these, including the latter categories, of clearly fictional characters intended and universally understood as such to be real and divine. In other words, Chris thinks that cartoons are real. Monotheism, the cornerstone of Christendom that cannot be compromised, was apparently never assimilated into Chris's thought processes, allowing him to continue regard Christ as a god. Same thing with Shanny. Monotheism isn't part of Shanny's thought process either. If you've seen some of her videos where she says that the Earth is getting its revenge, which is basically a reference to the Gaia theory, and karma is coming to all her haters, including all humanity, which again, borrowed by Hinduism and is not practiced by Christianity. So Shanny isn't that much of a monotheist and uses religion as a crutch to justify her claims. He claims to converse with and be friends with Jesus and several other deities. Nonetheless, Chris does not worship literally everybody. In a 2019 Twitter post, he was alarmed by Jacob Sockness' apparent Satanism, saying that no one should ever worship Satan. Shanny did hang out with Satanists when she was a teenager. Maybe that's probably where she got that idea. As late as August 2017, Chris could be seen in a normal church, albeit irreverently wearing his unicorn cosplay. However, he has since stopped attending, believing that he is unable to worship Jesus or any other deities on virtue of being a goddess himself. In Believe in the OCs and deities, Chris appeals to his viewers to send positive thoughts to fictional characters, as though through telepathy, perhaps indicating that he believes divine powers requires worship and oblations. Implicit in this is Chris's long-standing secular belief that he has hundreds of millions of earnest followers across the globe. Translation: Chris thinks that the world revolves around him, and he expects all of us to believe in fictional characters. On December 22nd, 2018, in a long rant on Twitter about the merge, Chris encouraged his audience to pray to him. I encourage everyone to keep faith and pray to the CPUs. Y'all may pray to me as well, Chris blaspheming. He has made several such appeals in months since. Let me check the time. Okay, we're still good. Afterlife and eschatology. I can't pronounce that word. Forget it. Afterlife and whatever that word is. Under the idea guide's lingering influence, Chris believes that departed souls go to C-197, the fictional universe that includes Quickfill, other misbegotten OCs, and various media franchise universes, which he believes objectively exist. It's obvious that Chris got that idea from South Park's Imagination Land trilogy. This C-197 is basically Imagination Land. And in several of his tweets from last year, Chris believes that late actor Adam West and late Marvel pioneer Stan Lee are in C-197 and will be making a comeback soon, once the dimensional merge happens. That's basically one of the people that he believes have been reincarnated into Sonichu. Sorry about that. He teaches that upon death, one may merge with one's Sonichu counterpart there. Among those who have been depicted in their Sonichu form on the other side include disastrous German Chancellor Adolf Hitler, serial killer and rapist Ted Bundy, and Chris's late father, Bob Chandler. He's also referenced Stan Lee, Adam West, possibly Carrie Fisher, the late SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg, and the late Stefan Carl. It's I want to see like a Stan Lee Sonichu down the road, or a Carrie Fisher Princess Leia Sonichu, Rosachu, a Princess Leia Rosechu. That'd be funny. Only the truly wicked, such as Liquid Chris, are denied this in the hereafter. And when he started talking about his dimensional merge, Chris said that all the good people would be united with their original character counterparts in Sonichus, where all the bad people will be destroyed and murdered upon the merge, such as President Donald Trump. So, Satan instead burns their bodies in the Hell's lava pool, aka Lake of Fire, purges them of their memories, and sends their oblivious souls to be reincarnated. Again, this also is directed towards Donald Trump too. Since autumn of 2018, Chris has taught that we are living in the latter days, from a mixture of off-brand comments by comic artists and several weens foddering him with misinformation and dumb inside jokes. Chris thinks that beginning in November of 2018, the real world, aka Dimension 1218, is in the process of combining with C-197 in what he calls the dimensional merge. Chris has attributed miscellaneous events, past and present, real and fictional, ranging from tragedies like September 11th's World Trade Center's destruction to the salmonella recalls and even COVID-19 to the impending merge, and recently COVID-19 to the impending merge. Oh, let's not forget the Notre Dame fire and the Australian bushfires. Originally projected to be complete before New Year's 2019, Chris maintains still that the merge is just about the corner. He still believes that the dimensional merge is going to happen. And with everything that's going on in the world right now, such as COVID-19, the justice for George Boyd in, well, the 2020 presidential election race, it's obvious that Chris will take all this to heart and use it for his dimensional merge. Chris foretells massive destruction heralding the merge that will result in the deaths of about half the world's population, as well as half of the fictional characters from C-197. That kind of reminds me of Harold Camping, when Harold Camping predicted the rapture on May 21st of 2011, and then on October 21st, 2011. That's basically what this is summing up. Oh, and also Shanny thinks this is going to happen too. Naturally, Chris, being the goddess in charge of managing the brouhaha, will be spared. Anyone else must take their chances. Survivors will be able to enjoy the company of their favorite cartoon characters in the flesh, as well as their deceased relatives transformed into electric hedgehog Pokemon. So, Chris believes that dead celebrities will be reincarnated into Sonichu characters. I want to see a Stan Lee Sonichu and a Princess Leia Sonichu in the near future. Mysticism and sorcery. Main article, magical thinking. As early as 2003, Chris has invoked curses against his enemies. Most famous is the Kamehameha, borrowed from Dragon Ball Z, which he had employed against Mary Lee Walsh. His magical thinking has been directed in various ways, as when he thought he could shift his body fat about by watching hypnotic internet videos. In recent years, he has embraced several occultic teachings and practices from the New Age movement. Well, technically, he's adopted these occult rituals from Jacob Sockness when he was talking to him. But we'll talk about Jacob Sockness in a later video. Out-of-body experiences, chakras, and special powers associated with crystals, among others. Historical beliefs. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them to do them. Romans 1:28-32. On Chris. And Shanny. Shanny too. But anyway, the first church Chris and his parents are known to have attended is a Korean Presbyterian church at Chesterfield County. Chris would later on attend Grace Baptist Church, a small congregation in Charlottesville that launched in 2000. In 2008, he was, under mysterious circumstances, forced to leave that community, at which time he began attending Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church. Although Chris traditionally identified himself as Methodist, and so did his father and mother identifies herself as a Presbyterian. His mother identifies herself as a Presbyterian. Wesley Mem is located near the University of Virginia and has an unusual liberal theology. The common conclusion among trolls is that congregations more in line with Chris's intolerance of homos are equally intolerant of him, so that he had to come there. So he had to come here. The doctrinal differences between the Southern Baptist and the Methodist denominations are probably too subtle for Chris to concern himself with, and he likely does not spiritually identify with any particular denominations of Christianity beyond simply being Protestant or even simply Christian. I'm going to check to see how much time I have. Still got a somewhat substantial amount of time. Traditionally, concept of Emmanuel. Traditionally, Chris had a fundamental belief in an omnipotent, benevolent male God. He also accepted Jesus Christ as the Son of God and the Savior of mankind. He was reluctant to mention God without also including Jesus, perhaps out of some sense that he must stress his specifically Christian notion of God, despite other Abrahamic sects using completely different words for him. In effect, Chris frequently referred to God and Jesus as if they were some sort of divinity. Well, he refers to them as God Jesus and the bear conductor. A deviation from the mainstream Christian concept of the Holy Trinity that his churches would regard as heretical. Most of the shit that Chris is preaching on his Twitter is heretical and blasphemous. But then again, this is Chris we're talking to. We're talking about. Being the unparalleled study of egotism he is, Chris seemed to view God as a more of an instrument of his own, Sorry. This paragraph right here. This paragraph really takes the cake when it comes to when it comes to me comparing when it comes to me comparing Shanny for Christ to Christian, is this first sentence right here. This first sentence right here. This entire paragraph right here. Minus the rapper contest and Adam Stackhouse. This paragraph. I just realized it. Being the unparalleled study of egotism he is, Chris seemed to view God as more of an instrument of his own will than a supreme being to whom he is subject. Again, like Shanny. Shanny does the same thing too. She uses God and Jesus as a tool to her own will, much like Chris. In Chris's view of God, the Almighty will overlook or simply not care about his misdeeds, much like Shanny, but will become as enraged as Chris over those of others, especially when they malign Chris. Again, just like Shanny. Case in point, the fact that Chris cheated in the Parappa the Rapper contest is not nearly as important as the suspicion that Adam Stackhouse did, and Chris invoked God numerous times in his threats to Adam. Chris believes God has a special interest in his own life, just like Shanny, which would be consistent with Western monotheism, except that he also thinks God has nothing better to do than attend to him and him alone, just like Shanny. In his worldview, God's primary purpose would be to arrange events so that he is happy. I don't know about that, but similar. Shanny has the same thing. Why do you think I have these screenshots of Shanny and Chris? Okay, we're still good. Sorry, I was just checking the time. Again. Where was that? God's prime. And punish those who make him unhappy. Sorry. Let me read that again. In his worldview, God's primary purpose should be to arrange events so that he is happy and punish those who make him happy, just like Shanny for Christ. This is nearly the exact opposite of Christianity, which states that man is to serve God. Again, what Shanny preaches on her YouTube channel about how God will avenge her, that sounds similar to what Christian believed. Before he referred to himself as a CPU goddess. Much like Christian, Shanny believed that God has nothing better to do than to attend to her as well. Much like Chris, she also believes that God should arrange events so that she would be happy and punish those who make her unhappy, much like Chris. But I'm getting off track right now. This is nearly I read that part. He has been commonly observed saying things like, "With God and Jesus on my side, I will." He often invokes the wrath of God in his infantile threats, and is obviously oblivious to the fact that God has yet to back him up on any of them. I wonder who that reminds me of. Shanny for Christ. Much like the Ayatollah Khomeini, I can't pronounce that name, Chris attributes most of his impetus to commands given to him directly from God, Jesus, and the bear conductor in visions. I'd say my spirit is active while I am awake, but it does more when I am at rest or sleeping, he wrote in 2014. His exact beliefs concerning these prophetic dreams are difficult to pinned down, but the most rational interpretation is that Chris dreams about something he'd like to do when he wakes up, and then wakes up and decides it was God telling him to do it. In Chris's mind, each vision is simultaneously a directive to do something and proof that it will happen no matter what occurs. You know, that's basically what dreams are. It's basically like an astral projection of subconscious thought. Doesn't really have any meaning other than having thoughts of something prior. For instance, after Chris had a vision about fathering a daughter, he decided he was required to actively make that happen, while also assuring himself that failure was impossible. When Chris was being accused of racism for insisting that he can only date white women, he justified this by arguing that his prophesied daughter must be white. Visions from God supposedly confirmed that Blanca Weiss, then Panda Halo, and finally Ivy were to be the mother of Chris's child, despite the fact that each of these women subsequently turned out to be trolls. This proves that God, if he exists, is either not responsible for Chris's supposedly prophetic dreams, or is having a laugh at his expense, an idea which Chris may have later taken to heart. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Ephesians 2:8-10. On the place of good deeds in the Christian faith. Excuse me. Like most people, our souls leave our bodies. We end up in heaven or hell, depending on our deeds, misdeeds, and possibly reincarnation. I wonder if Shanny believes in reincarnation. If she does, well, it's implied because she said she wanted a heavenly body. While the idea of good deeds causing someone to go to heaven and bad deeds sending them to hell is a common one, most Protestant theology explicitly states that the salvation of one's soul is based completely on one's faith. Defying this, Chris has stated that one goes to heaven or hell based completely on personal actions. That reminds me of Shanny. He thinks that he will go to heaven because he's done a lot of good deeds. Just like Shanny. Likewise, he feels that homos are almost certainly bound to go to hell and need to become heterosexuals to better their chances of going to heaven. He also stated numerous of times that he feels various trolls are bound for hell. Well, like Shanny. For making fun of people over the internet. Sorry, let me read that again. He also stated numerous times that he feels various trolls are bound for hell for making fun of people over the internet. I could say that ShannyforChrist does the same thing too. Has that same belief too. That anyone who makes fun of people on the internet are bound to go to hell. Trolls are going to troll. He has suggested that they commit suicide so that they might receive their eternal punishment faster. I don't know if Shanny has told people to commit suicide yet, but if any of you guys have any proof, Burnt Toast, I would like to see Burnt Toast. I want to ask if you can reach out to me to see if Shanny has ever told anyone to commit suicide, so that they could receive their eternal punishment forever, faster? Let me know. In Common Questions 9/2010, Thor questioned Chris for threatening damnation against his internet adversaries. I would like to ask that question to Shanny on Twitter, assuming if she hasn't blocked me yet, why she is threatening damnation against people on the internet. You often attempt to scare trolls by saying that they will go to hell. Some of your trolls do not believe in hell. What do you have to say to them? That's a really interesting question. Not everyone believes in heaven or hell. And I think that's what G-Man does too. He says that, well, G-Man has also threatened damnation on his internet rivals, such as Dragnot, Burnt Toast, members of the Geek Room. He's threatened damnation on them. And that's because he was implementing those same religious beliefs as Shanny, where Shanny has been threatening damnation on everyone on the planet. To which Chris responded, "Firstly, it is not a scare tactic. It is fact. And secondly, I say, well, believe it or not, you are not dead yet." Further complicating Chris's ideas of the afterlife. He also believes in ghosts, going so far as to claim that he might have seen one. He also believed that he was going to send the ghost of his late father after Megan. Or he also said that he was going to sick the ghost of his dead dog, Patty, onto Alec Benson Leary. And I think he was featured in like some amateur ghost hunting channel. In 2013, Chris commented that he had considered suicide, but the only reason I don't do it, are my mother and my dogs, and that premature death leaves one in limbo. In reality, limbo is, in some Roman Catholic views, a state that unbaptized infants were supposed to enter into when they died. That's basically was inspired and implemented in Dante's Inferno. I don't know if the poet Dante took that theology or not, or is just lampooning it. Happy but excluded from God due to their original sin, Christian views on suicide and the fate of suicides in the afterlife is highly varied. His belief that suicide leads to limbo may stem from the South Park episode Death, in which it is found that the grandfather of Stan's grandfather is spending an eternity in limbo for having his grandson euthanize him. I saw that episode several times. Wasn't really that great. In the eulogy Chris made for Patty, he wrote that Patty has departed from our world here on Earth to a doggy heaven, where she will run free and play with all the other dogs who are already having fun up in doggy heaven. This suggests that Chris believes that animals, or at least dogs, have an afterlife. Reincarnation. Chris has said that he is open to the idea of reincarnation, common in Hinduism and other Eastern religions. In 2009, he stated flatly that he believed in the concept, but in 2014, he seemed more uncertain, writing writing, "It is possible, but I'm not sure." He has yet to offer any criteria for what might cause someone to be reincarnated. Reincarnation, while reincarnation was, and to some extent is still embraced by a few Christian sects, Chris has nothing to do with them and seems to have lifted the notion from somewhere else. If I'm not mistaken, if it all depends on karma. And this kind of reminds me of that scene in Pineapple Express where Dale Denton finds Red up in the bathroom with like a bowl of noodles and the cake that he made for his deceased cat with a bunch of wine coolers while Bone Thugs and Harmony were playing in the background. Where Red's like, "I'm into the Buddhism and think of me as like a hermit crab changing shells." And then Dale Denton, Seth Rogen's character, says, "If you're a dick your whole life, your next shell will be made of shit. If you're an asshole, you're going to come back as a cockroach or a worm or an anal bead." That's basically something that follows this ideology of reincarnation. Chris has suggested that he is himself a reincarnation of various people. In Sonichu, Chris's fictional counterpart is the reincarnation of an ancient leader of the Cherokee clan. Though he does not appear to believe this about himself in real life, however, during the epilogue of Sonichu episode 26, Chris mentions a real-world dream in which he discovered that he had been a true and honest lesbian hippie who attended Woodstock in a recent past life. Recently, I don't know if it was last year yeah, it was last year. Jacob Sockness had this fictional conversation with Magichan where he says to Magichan that Chris is the reincarnation of some alien princess from Kitasuna, or alien goddess deity from Kitasuna, who was sent to Earth to suffer a lifetime of worthlessness for her punishment, as punishment for her defiance against the Rokat Empire. And I think Chris actually believes that shit. He creates this dream with the realization that he has a female soul and decision to identify as a transsexual as opposed to a crossdresser, i.e. tomgirl, further calling the psychological validity of his gender identity into question. It's also stated that the LGBTQ community, the LGBT, condemns Chris's ideologies about his gender identity. Because they think he's making a mockery of their disorder, so they kicked him out of one of their groups. Besides his own reincarnation, Chris's explanation of what happened to Liquid Chris in the Sonichu canon mentions Liquid's soul being cleared of all memories of previous incarnations before being reincarnated as what Chris considers an ironic punishment for someone who dared impersonate him. Chris believes that in other dimensions, people have the innate ability to swap bodies with others, even inanimate robots. Yeah, Chris has stated that he has swapped bodies with Magichan and Sonichu, which is still a current thing that's going on his Twitter. Chris has claimed to have swapped bodies with a some sex doll that Jacob Socknes made that to cuddle with. It's stupid. Sin. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus Christ, Matthew 5:44. That's basically what Shanny's been using to... That's what Shanny for Christ has been enforcing that theology down people's throats in most of her videos, because she's saying that there's no more love in this world, and she wants God to punish everyone on this planet. When... Look, again, you can't force everyone to believe in your faith, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. They might not be the opinions you prefer, but to each his own. It is what it is. I pray to God and Jesus to kill Jason Kendrick Howell. Chris, Sonnet Girls Forum. I wonder if Shanny has ever prayed to God to kill irate Alex. Have a goddamn heart attack right now. This very moment you read this message, you goddamn bitching whore. Email from Chris to Vivian. Again, I want to know if Shanny for Christ has ever prayed to God to kill Charlie Gold or irate Alex. Burnt Toast, if you can contact me through Twitter direct message if you have any proof that Shanny has sent death threats wishing God to kill Alex or Charlie, let me know. Chris's understanding of Christian theology is extremely limited. He does not seem to know about anything the Bible has... He does not seem to know anything about the Bible, although he apparently owns a copy of the New International Version. Again, same with Shanny. The Christian theology is very limited. His hatred of homos had nothing to do with the prohibition of sodomy in the Old Testament, which he was unaware of until he heard about it from Family Guy, which anyone who knows about Christian knows that most of the ideas that Christian borrows is basically from cartoons that he watches. I mean, yeah, I kind of had this idea once, but I know it's just Mod Podge of Seth MacFarlane ripping off Matt Groening. I like him as a host for Comedy Central roasts when he pokes jabs at the guest of honor. And he's a really good singer, too, Seth MacFarlane. But that's about it. His aversion to spilling his seed and his dedication to the unborn have absolutely no basis in biblical passages condemning sexual immorality and abortion. Other than vehemently opposing homos, trolls, and jerk-hops, Chris seems to have little notion about the nature of sin and evil, except that people who do things he doesn't like should go to hell. Again, that does sound like Shanny. This is completely at odds with the part of Christian philosophy that states, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and anyone who repents his sins will be redeemed. Again, Shanny tries to enforce her religious beliefs on everyone. And I think this also goes with what Shanny does. This paragraph. Chris believed that if he confesses his sins to God Jesus, he will be forgiven. A private confessions directly to God are not uncommon in Protestantism, but generally it's assumed that the confessor is doing so out of true remorse and generally to atone for mistakes. Shanny doesn't do that. However, Chris abuses the purpose of confession so that he can commit whatever wrongs he wants and then wipe the slate clean with his confessions. Shanny does that too. For example, Chris made a video in which he suggested that Clyde Cash and Jack Thaddeus commit suicide so that they can burn in hell forever. Again, burnt toast. If you have any information about Shanny telling people to commit suicide, let me know. Later, he drew them doing just that in his comics. Just one day after the comic appearance, Chris answered a fan letter asking why he had been wishing suicide upon them, and pointing out that such a wish conflicts with his Christian beliefs. Chris responded that he has confessed of that to God and Jesus, and they have forgiven him on that. One of two things happened. Either Chris wished for their deaths in a video, asked for forgiveness, then gleefully drew it happening afterward anyway. Or he waited until he finally got done saying his piece, then conveniently offered up his confession right after getting everything out of his system. Either way, such a confession is highly disingenuous. When Chris gave his in to temptation and cybered with Vanessa Hudgens in violation of his monogamous relationship with Ivy, Chris made a big production out of confessing his sins and seeking forgiveness. Again, I'm probably sure Shanny doesn't own up to her sins about, cucking Rev, since she's cheated on her other husbands in the past. And she claims to be a good Christian woman. But her actions speak otherwise. Chris clearly does not follow the Christian concept of the 7 deadly sins, as he commits wrath, envy, gluttony, sloth, greed, lust, and pride constantly. Again, I said this in several other videos describing the sins that Shanny has committed, and they're the exact same thing. And Chris probably isn't keen on the actual 7 deadly sins, but watches the 7 deadly sins anime rather than learn about the actual sins. And again, I digress. Forgiveness. A major tenet in most any religion you can think of is the act of forgiveness. Unfortunately for Chris, he has no idea of what forgiveness really is, and will often hold grudges against anybody he feels has wronged him, sometimes even for years. Again, Shanny does the same thing. She claims to have forgiven people in the past, but then again does a 180 and just lambasts them for doing the things that she accuses him of doing. While some may argue that he did not show forgiveness in a few of his videos, even more will argue that such things were done either under an ulterior motive, again, Shanny did that, or is meaningless as he goes on to curse and scream at them later on. Again, Shanny did the same thing with Irate Alex when she said that when she asked if he needed money, and she claims that she has been giving money to people, but then would curse them out later on. During his trial on July 10th, 2012, it was discovered that Michael Snyder made an honorable plea that Chris be shown leniency as a felony as a felony was a life-changing event that could really harm Chris in the long run. This comes despite Chris scaring his customers away while he was still allowed in the store, shouting racist slurs at him, threatening to set fire to his business, and injuring him with his car. This was probably the most extraordinary form of forgiveness that anyone has ever shown towards Chris. Even after the latter's horrible actions, Chris' shows of gratitude was to go against all common sense and commit public slander in a court of law. I don't think that thieving liar deserves a red cent, Chris. This is how the trial went. However, Chris has on occasion shown some capacity of genuinely forgive and move on, as shown at MagFest, where he was seen making up with Adam Stackhouse, albeit after 11 years. Such forgiveness had not been extended to the jerk cops, however. Apostasy. I can't pronounce that word. By the way, how long? Holy crap. Well, we're going on 2 hours anyway, so it's not a big issue. Apostasy. For years before the idea guys seized the opportunity to infuse patent absurdities into Chris's mind, Chris appeared to have become somewhat disenchanted with God. Traditional theology has long dealt with the problem of evil in books Chris is unlikely to read at any time soon. Sorry about that. This ain't a stream, by the way. Despite Chris's strong belief that God Jesus was backing him up on his love quest, God has nevertheless imparted upon him such stress and trolling. He seemed to believe that the way prayer should work is the same way a little kid learns to get what they want, by saying please. Shanny does the same thing too. To Chris, prayer was apparently like ordering a pizza. As long as you pray for something, it'll show up for you exactly how you ordered it. That, I'm gonna be honest. I kind of had that same mindset too. But it didn't take me long to realize that I had to look up some decent prayers that are genuine. It all depends on belief system. Since Chris hasn't gotten exactly what he has prayed for, the fault must lie with God. In a farewell letter meant for his fellow parishioners at Wesley Memorial, he wrote that God sees fit for some reason to continue to curse me as a jinx. I'm gonna continue doing this shit. On September 7th, 2013, Chris cursed God's name on Facebook after a run-in with the jerk cop. God is giving me the middle finger yet again. I backed up and scratched a car in El Agave lot. And she's a damn smoker. Now the damn jerk cop is giving me a hard time because I am screaming up at freaking Emmanuel God. I want God to kill me now if he is going to keep giving me middle fingers in a damn difficult life. He explained the reason for his disillusionment in May of 2013 in a May 2013 letter to Kim. Hey Kim, I have just read over some of the webpage Phil relayed to me. I must admit, and Amy is welcome to read this as well, it took me by surprise seeing the words magic and pagan in this religion. I like magic. I have fully accepted Jesus as my Savior, and my mother, father, and what I've hear on television, all have informed me about heaven, hell, that the best way to live is as one does without much regret or with moderate acceptance and forgiveness. And that God is within all of us as energy and direction. And in the end, we all believe in the same God, or goddess. Yet also, if God is supposed to love us all, why does he let me continue to have a lot of downs in my life? I often feel temptation towards destroying the Lego minifigure I have made in an image of God, or otherwise just torching it. I admit, I am not perfect. But I prattle or digress. So all things considered, Amy, I will be most willing to try your way on and see how I feel fully about it. The way I figure it, at least I can still go to my church regardless. Smiley face. Soon thereafter, inspired by Futurama, he seemed to divorce himself from the Christian conception of God altogether, choosing to believe in a rather capricious, relativistic deity. Again, Chris is just ripping off cartoons. The higher force above us all is always messing with each of our individual minds every day. Rather, each of you call him God, Emmanuel, Zeus, Buddha, or even the individual destiny of your own. I am not an atheist because I sincerely believe in the higher force of above us. Even Jesus may be the higher force's son, but every religion will have you believing in the one same higher force, right or wrong. It is truly set up to each individual perception of every individual soul among us, the billions of people on this big blue marble, among marbles in the universe. Chris on Facebook, August 2014. And this goes to show how much this is going to be relevant when Shanny does the same thing. Chris and other faiths. Given his sheltered existence in the heart of the suburban American South, Chris probably hasn't had much direct exposure to anything but mainstream brands of Protestantism. When his fans asked him for his feelings on other religions during an IRC chat, he glossed over the question and simply reiterated his own unthinking statement of faith. At other times, his comments have been scattered and inconsistent. Other Christian denominations. Chris has no connection to Catholicism, which he seems to regard as a benign but alien practice. In his comics, he assigns it to a minor character, Angelica Rosechew, whose faith doesn't practically differentiate her from the rest of the inhabitants of Quickville. She's still as much of a slut as the rest of her species. Oh, that's funny. And she kind of... I want to believe that she's basically a ripoff of Rouge the Bat because of her white fur. Through Angelica, it is obvious that Chris knows nothing about Catholicism and seems to think it's just a variety of Protestantism with nuns. He refers to Catholic priests as pastors, and often certainly doesn't know the Catholic Bible is different from one generally used by Protestants. Also, Angelica's home congregation is called the Samuel Memorial United Christian Church, which is about the least likely name for a Roman Catholic church. Chris could have come up with this he does at least realize that Catholicism is a form of Christianity, although he probably has no idea what its relationship to Protestantism is. Excuse me. Panda Halo's persona was designed to be a devoutly Roman Catholic, specifically to confound Chris's desire for premarital sex with contraception. Faced with the challenge, Chris tried to argue that God really does allow premarital sex because his pastor said so. And ironically, deference to a cleric on ethical matters is far more typical for Catholics than Protestants. It didn't even occur to Chris that what his pastor said to him wouldn't apply to a Catholic, because Chris is incapable of seeing things from perspectives besides his own. Huh. Kind of sounds like Shanny. Again, given that he takes his own religion a la carte, Chris is likely unaware of most of the difference between the sects of Protestantism and the relationship between Protestantism and other kinds of Christianity. He has never been pressed for comment on Eastern variants of Christianity, such as the Eastern Orthodox Church, and is uncertain what he thinks of these sects, or if he is even aware of their existence. It doesn't matter, I'm just going to drag this on. Other religions. Most of Chris's opinions towards non-Christian faiths have been culled from South Park and other television series. For example, on December 28, 2009, Chris wrote a blog entry telling jackbags to get out of the closet and go into effing Scientology. Following this comment, Chris was asked to elaborate his thoughts on Scientology. He said that he neither agrees with or disapproves it. A Sonichu and Rosechu Christmas story and Sonichu issue 11 reveal that Chris has a somewhat basic awareness of Judaism, probably picked up from watching South Park. He appears to not understand that Jews and Buddhists don't celebrate Christmas, at least not the religious aspects of it. However, in a way he wrote it, it is unknown if he's implying that Christian Jews and Buddhists go to the same place of worship, or if he's saying they go to separate places to worship, and calls them churches because his vocabulary is heavily lacking. You know, Jews go to like a citadel and Buddhists go to like a ashram or monastery. In Michael Snyder is cold-hearted and mean, Chris uses Jew as an insult, which he got from South Park. And he states he is just throwing it out there that he thinks Snyder's Jewish. Chris is basically the real-life Eric Cartman at this point. He incidentally subscribes to his father's views that Snyder, Megan Schroeder, and others were secretly directing the trolls to ruin Chris's life. Some favorite comedians is a thinly veiled, furious, backpedaling attempt in which he rambles on and on about how he respects Jewish comedians like Jerry Seinfeld. Dude, don't bring Jerry Seinfeld into your mess. He was one of my idols. Chris has described Mormons as not being dateable. He has never explained why, but he may have learned through Anna McLaren that Mormons typically don't date non-Mormons, which is untrue. again, this is Chris's thinking, not everyone else's thinking. While it is not clear how much Chris knows about Unitarianism, he is not hostile towards that sect. Jackie identified herself as a Unitarian, and Chris was not bothered by this, conceivably because he didn't know what it was. In a Wikipedia article, he hints at the hatred of Islam. Although the article primarily exists to deny various accusations trolls have made about him, he does not deny being a prolific hater of all things not Christian. In likelihood, he knows nothing about Islam or the Quran, and is not known to have either publicly commented on other religions directly, besides using the popular Western image of the fat Buddha, actually a Chinese monk, and mentioning Buddha a few times. Chris has never shown any knowledge of Oriental religions, let alone any opinion of them. Indeed, Vivian G's belief in Taoism seemed to be a concept he couldn't process, and even seemed to make him uneasy. Atheism. Now this one is the one that I have seen thrown around when it comes to people like Christian, ShannyforChrist, or G-Man. There is a somewhat vitriol hatred for atheists. I have no problem with atheists. You can feel free to believe in what you want. I just don't have a problem with it. What I do have a problem is narcissism when it comes to waving your narcissistic ideologies around like a badge of honor. And that's basically what Chris does. Atheism. But I would certainly not want to be an atheist because I don't have God or Jesus by my side. I would be more lost than I was considerably beforehand. Atheists are the devil spawning, as it would seem, and I would certainly not want to be amongst them when they are run out of town with the pitchforks and the haste and the fire. As a believer, I would either be a peacemaker. I would more likely be a peacemaker, but I certainly wouldn't mind being one with the pitchfork, following the crowd and pushing the atheists out of town. That sounds like something G-Man or Shanny would say towards Dragnot and other atheists. Chris's opinion on the irreligious is the most vacillating and incoherent, and incidentally, one of the best documented. Unsurprisingly, he doesn't seem to like or trust atheists, but even there, he has a hard time articulating his opinion. When Vivian asked him to explain why he dislikes them, he said, "I don't know, but I do know that they are not believers of God and Jesus." When Chris exposed Thorg, his reasoning for wanting people to troll Thorg instead of him devolve from because he's trolling me or to because he's an evil atheist. In his calling out video, Chris gave Pizza Face Atheist as Thorg's defining characteristic with a heretofore unseen vitriol. Chris's half-brother Cole Smithy is also an atheist, although his opinion on this is unclear. In the OkCupid answers, Chris stated that he would not date an atheist. On the other hand, the Wallflower told Chris in one of her emails that she had no religion, and as the rest of the correspondence show, Chris was not bothered by her lack of faith and continued to pursue her because he wants the China. However, in his later revised OkCupid count, Chris states, to the surprise of nobody, that he would be willing to date atheists if it meant that he had a chance at some hanky-panky. And that does about it with Chris and religion. I hope you liked that video. I'm hoping to do more of this shit later on down the road. And again, I'm sorry for comparing with the minor comparisons between Shanny and Chris. You can tell that their ideas are similar to a certain extent. But I digress. Anyway, I hope you liked it. If you want to see more of these quickie readings, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Rickzilla. You can follow me on Twitter, RGHiMe91. And once I update my Patreon, and maybe leave it in the comments below, in the description below, you can follow me on there. And I hope to see you guys next time, so peace out, folks.